Well, we must always remember it is Jerusalem that kept the Jewish people as a whole intact for 2,000 years of exile. These were Jews that were expelled to more than 150 different countries. And each and every one of them, throughout the generations, prayed next year in Jerusalem. So certainly now, when God's prophecy has been fulfilled, at least a great deal of it, and the Jewish people were gathered from all four corners of the world and are still gathering to their home, to the holy place, to their holy land, to Zion. Now it is incumbent upon the Jewish people to guard Jerusalem, just as Jerusalem guarded them as a people. This is our most sacred mission. It's not only a spiritual mission, it's not only a political mission, I would say it's a divine, it's a godly mission that we have to do if we are seeking life, if we are seeking the truth. And Jerusalem is the most sacred place to us and has always been to part of the Judeo-Christian heritage. Unfortunately, what is new now in our age is that there is a systematic, vicious campaign by some Muslims, by Palestinians, to try to sever the connection of the Jewish people to Jerusalem. But the truth has prevailed and will prevail, and this is why we're here. Well, we were formed as a people right here in the Holy Land, in Canaan, in Zion, in Israel. We developed our civilization here. Our history was forged here. Our legal code, which today is also the norm throughout Judeo-Christian world and Western civilizations, whether it's the Ten Commandments and whether this is the words of the prophets and the judges and the Jewish kings, and also of Jesus Christ, who we always remember was a Jewish rabbi. So for us, we are part of the land, we are of the land, and this is why the land also belongs to us. Unfortunately, through the travails of time, there were many occupiers. This very small sliver of land, which is, by the way, less than 1/3 of 1% of the entire Middle East, was coveted by many, many great forces, whether the Persians or the Babylonians or the Assyrians or the Turks, Ottomans, the Mamelukes, you name it. We were the only sovereign here from 3,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. All the rest here were occupiers that came and left, whether they were crusaders or whether it was the forces of Salah ad-Din from Saudi Arabia and the Muslim world. But the only sovereigns here were the Jewish people. And I think the miracle of our age is that after 2,000 years ago, although there was always Jewish presence in the Holy Land, in Old Jerusalem, in Tzfat, in Tiberias and other places, but yet we were denied sovereignty and control of our own destiny. But against all odds, with all the pogroms and with the heinous Holocaust, the Jews came back and reunited with a very small remnant of Jewish people that was here throughout this 2,000 years of exile. And I think the miracle is that it is all authorized and it is all written in the Bible. Whether it's the Ezekiel prophecy and Isaiah and Jeremiah, it's all back. And the fact that we still hold to our own beliefs and our own traditions and the same prayers, nothing has changed from the time of Jesus, of 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. The fact that we came from 150 different places, still, although the Jews were separated by seas and oceans, whether they were in Africa or Asia or America or Europe, but they still kept the same prayers and the same traditions and the same language. So today, 2,000 years after the big exile, we are back here and reviving our country. Israel, we have to remember, the state of Israel was not established in 1948. It was re-established. The authority upon which it was built is not necessarily the League of Nations back from 1920 or 22, San Remo, or not from the necessary from the United Nations, although they recognized us as a state. It comes from time immemorial. We have to remember the Ottoman Rule existed here for 400 years, from 1517 to 1917. It ended with the World War I, as the Ottoman Empire was part of the Axis with Germany and others against the Allied forces. The British conquered the land in 1917 from the Ottomans and were kept here as custodians for about 30 years until we got our sovereignty back from the United Nations. Now, during these 400 years of Jewish life here, I must say that Jews were lived as dhimmis. They were looked upon as second class. There are more than one or two stories about the fact that when Jewish people were meeting Ottomans on the street, they had to shy away, they had to walk away so to let them have the right of way. I think that the most telling story and fact to describe how Jews were considered by the Ottomans is our patriarch cave in Hebron. We were not allowed to go to our own patriarch cave, so we had to build a place outside the cave, and there was a set of stairs, a stairway outside. And Jews were not allowed to climb the stairs above the 7th step, so they will never be equal to where the mosque that was built there. And if you look at all the Islamic buildings here, they were built on Jewish heritage, and you have all the archaeology, whether it's in the Patriarch Cave in Jerusalem, or whether you have the Al-Aqsa on the holiest mountain, which is the Moriah mountain, and the Temple Mount here in Jerusalem. So they were always considered as second-class citizens. Mark Twain, aka Mr. Clement Samuel, as I believe, was here, I think, in the 1860s, and sometimes a snapshot can give you a more incisive look than anything else. He came, he toured the land, he walked the land, and he didn't see anyone. And I think his description is very accurate and also historically fair, because he talked about a desolate land which was really being ravaged by nomads. The Ottomans, who were the occupiers here, did not invest anything. not in infrastructure, and not in the well-being of the population. And the population here was very scarce, very, very scarce, mostly nomadic people. Actually, we have all the censuses show that Jews were a majority here in the 18th century and also in the early 19th centuries, certainly in Jerusalem. And only with the revival of the Jewish national movement to come back to our roots, to come back to Zion, hence Zionism. Only with the beginning of Zionism that built here infrastructure and created jobs, only then we have people from the region coming to the land. And only after we have reclaimed our land in a modern way as a state, did the local Arabs claim their own state. Well, I believe that the Balfour Declaration, which was the formal policy of the British government, was something which was imperative at the time. The Brits understood, the British government understood the importance of history and heritage and of justice. And this goes to show to anyone who says, especially the Palestinians today, they say that Israel was built to alleviate the conscience of Europe after the Holocaust, to give a place to the Jews on account of the Arabs. There's nothing which is further from the truth. First of all, Balfour Declaration from 1917 is about 25 years before the Holocaust. And it was based on legality, on history, and also on the political expediency of the time. Understanding that this land belongs to the Jews, has always belonged to the Jews, and as World War I was coming to an end, and there needed to be a new political arrangement here in the Middle East, the understanding by the British was that Israel is the homeland and belongs to the Jewish people. Certainly, after they realized, the same British that authorized the land of Israel to the Jews, the same Brits that have authorized the rest of the 97% or 99.7% of the Middle East to the Arabs. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and all the rest of the countries. So if you look at the partition, the real partition is not how to really dissect the very small sliver of land which is ours, but the real partition was between Zion, the land of Israel, and the rest of the Middle East, which makes, and they got 99.7% of it, the Arabs. Yes, the League of Nations actually voted in San Remo, and most of the powers of today are signatories to this decision of giving the entire Holy Land to Israel. There are countries, even Japan is a signatory to this. Unfortunately, this did not come into realization because of political considerations and other pressures. And this also goes to show, if I can open a little bracket here, is that we, I think as Jewish people, but also any small peoples, cannot unfortunately rely always on the international community. The international community, unfortunately, is always very slow to react, if react at all. The international community did not prevent the systematic massacre of 6 million Jews by the Nazis and their accomplices. And even in this day and age, they do not prevent the horrible murder of Syrian people by Assad regime. They do not prevent the massacres or genocides in Rwanda and in Darfur. So this is something that we have to remember. Always we must retain the capability and the right to defend ourselves by ourselves. And this is also the importance of the rebuilding of the State of Israel. Not only because of the history, the legality, the heritage that we belong to the land and this land belongs to us, but also because of the real cruel laws of the jungle that we still see. And this is the only place where Jews can live freely and where we can defend ourselves by ourselves. And we don't have to give too many historical examples what happens to us when we don't have our land. And I believe it is bigger than all of us, certainly bigger than what men can make, the fact that we are back here and we have a special covenant. And we have to remember, as God in his covenant with Abraham and then with Moses and with all the prophets gave this land to us, this behooves us to live up to this covenant. And just as God never goes back on his covenant, it always evolves, but he never goes back on the covenant. And this is why I so much repudiate the so-called replacement theory by others. The people of Israel is the same people of Israel. The land of Israel is the same land of Israel. The Bible is the same Bible. God's covenant is the same covenant. And just as he promised it to us, we have no choice. We are here to guard the land and our own for his glory. So this is why we are here. This is why we will always stay here. Herzl, incidentally, did not come out of the spiritual or religious aspect. He came out of the pragmatic and the political. He realized, because of the Dreyfus Affair, he realized that the Jewish people, the Jews, will always be the scapegoat. Because if you are a minority, and in most cases a successful minority, Jews in every country they were contributed to the arts and to the science and to the economy and to the politics and everywhere. Whether it was in Spain or in Europe or today in the United States, for instance. But they were always very vulnerable to anti-Semitism. So the Dreyfus Affair was a watershed where Herzl realized that if we do not have our own land, we will be again just the dregs of the earth. We will be under the vagaries of time and tyrants that we have to go back to the land. So he came from a political pragmatic, which united with the spiritual, religious of time immemorial. And although there were different offers to the Zionist national movement to create a land in Africa, in Uganda, in Russia, Birubijan. Some even had ideas to do it in Argentina. But it came dead on arrival because we realized, and Herzl realized, and the Zionist movement realized that if we revive our national integrity and destiny, it can be only in one place, which is Zion. Yes, the pogroms also, there was a critical mass where Jewish leaders said enough is enough. I have to also make sure that we all understand the pogroms were not only part of the European history. It was also part of the Middle East. And there were pogroms by Muslims against Jews who lived in Arab countries. The most notable one is what is called the Farhud, which was the pogrom against Iraqi Jews in Baghdad, 1941, where 150 Jews were killed by the Iraqi Arabs. This was just one example, but there were other pogroms against the Jewish people in Syria or Lebanon or in Libya or in other places in the Maghreb. So when we talk about the rebuilding of the state by Jewish refugees, it's not just refugees from the Holocaust, but it's also Jewish refugees from Arab countries who were denied of their social rights and human rights and civil rights, and many of them were either thrown out or many had to leave without anything, just their shirts on their backs. So today I'm also leading a campaign to recognize the history of the Jews from Arab countries, that they were refugees too, and they need justice and they need remedy, and first of all they need recognition. When the Palestinians or Arabs talk about their refugees who were not thrown out of here, but they were actually living upon the call of the Arab leaders in 48 that said, get out of the way so we can drive the Jews to the sea, to the Mediterranean. The Jewish refugees were not hostile to the people that they were living amongst in the Arab countries, and yet they were thrown out, or those who left voluntarily could not take away their belongings or their assets. So the issue of Jewish refugees from Arab countries should be addressed, and hopefully when the time will come for peace here, which means not just a piece of paper, but a true reconciliation and a true recognition of our inalienable rights to be here. We don't have to apologize. Nobody does us a favor around here recognizing our rights to be here. But once there will be an understanding that the way to peace and peaceful coexistence is this recognition, we hope that at that time the solution will be found to all refugees, Arabs and Jews at the same time. Well, the partition plan was a very, very difficult for us, for our leaders at the time to accept, because it tore away more than half of our country. Yet, I think pragmatism at the time prevailed, and also it was the Jewish tradition to try and reconcile, to extend our hand in peace. You know, our most spoken word is peace, shalom. We welcome with shalom, we part away with shalom, and we really wanted this shalom here. And for that reason, Ben-Gurion and the Zionist leaders of the time agreed, although it was excruciatingly painful, to agree to establish or re-establish our state only of part of the land, partition, and give the other part to the Arabs. Unfortunately, or some would say fortunately, maybe it was God's plan, the Arabs, not only that they were not grateful, they rejected it. They rejected it, and on the day that we declared our independence as a modern state, May 15th, 1948, 7 Arab armies invaded our country with the sole aim of just annihilating us and the new reborn state. But the rest is history. Not only we survived, but we thrived. And ever since There are many Israeli offers to the Palestinians, which were more than generous. And every time the Palestinians rejected, as for them, it's all or nothing. For them, they want the Holy Land to become a Palestine, which is an Islamic land with no foothold for non-Islamist or non-Arabs here. And I must tell you that when I read my scriptures, it very much reminds me of a biblical teaching story. It was the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, that was given all the opportunities to let the people of Israel go. Moses came to him many times, let my people go. And as the scriptures say, God hardened the heart of Pharaoh to the inevitable ending of Pharaoh in the Red Sea, and actually the glory of the Jewish people. It seems like history repeats itself. The Palestinian leaders had many opportunities to part way with us in peace, to have their own state, living side by side with us, with recognition, with trust, with security, with great cooperation. But always, it's like their heart was hardened and they never, ever accepted a compromise, no matter how generous it was their way. So with the partition, we agreed, they did not. They came to conquer us, we prevailed, and the rest is history. And again, God's word will always prevail. And this is why we are so trusting and we are so optimistic about our future. A peace in the Middle East will come only with the understanding by the Arabs that we are here for a reason, and the reason is that we belong here. Once the Arabs understand that they are not doing us any favor, that it's not really a compromise, that they agree to our existence, only then we can come as partners and as pars into the negotiation table and find solutions. Solutions can be found, but the real obstacle to any dignified solution is the Palestinian creed that we do not belong here, that and they believe in a one-state solution. Some say they believe in this phase theory, but basically, if you read their teachings, and I'm not just talking about the Hamas, which is a terrorist group, Islamist, that for them there is no reconciliation. I'm talking about Fatah, which supposedly is the more pragmatic, supposedly is the more moderate, but Fatah itself, with the current leaders of Mr. Abu Mazen and Mr. Fayyad and the others, they themselves do not even consider recognizing Israel as the Jewish state. They do not recognize a real compromise, and they continue with a delegitimization campaign, and they continue with incitement. If you read the Palestinian teaching in their schools and their notebooks and their textbooks, if you see what they promote in their mosques, if you see what the Palestinian media talks about, is pretty much about only Palestinian state here. And they do not recognize our rights. This is the obstacle. Once we will go over this obstacle, I think we can sit with open minds, with open hearts, and everything is capable of being solved.